Demodands, also called the gehreleths, are the chaotic evil fiends from Carceri, the prison of the Multiverse. Quote, "At once the simplest and most puzzling of all the fiends, the gehreleths seem to exist only to destroy, and to destroy gehreleths in particular. They are primal and instinctual, with little society or culture to speak of. Even the poetically bent Shator prefer to corrupt other cultures rather than create their own. Gehreleths are reviled by the Batazu and Tanari for getting in the way of the Blood War, and worse yet, refusing to fight on either side, and they're hated by the gehreleths for their deep-seated vendetta against that race. Gehreleths are, in short, the most despised creatures in the multiverse, and they strike back accordingly. If one sees a leth while on his travels, his best bet is to hide until the creature has passed. Gehreleths aren't beasts that can be dealt with. They are agents of annihilation." End quote. Okay, before I get into this video, I do want to clear up one thing real quick, but if you don't care, just use the timestamps to skip this. I'm sure we have all done that thing where you read a word for the first time. You've never encountered that word before, and you read it, and you pronounce it a specific way in your head. Then, after pronouncing it that way in your head for a very long time, you discover that the actual pronunciation is different. I did that with a lot of these words. I did eventually find a pronunciation guide for these names, and I do try to pronounce them correctly. However, I tended to slip back into my incorrect pronunciations throughout this video, so you are going to hear multiple pronunciations of the same words, and one of them is technically wrong. It's not that big of a deal because at the end of the day, they are all made up silly fantasy names, but it did kind of bother me, but I didn't want to go through and re-record every bit. So just so you know, this one is Demodand. This one is gehreleth. This is Farastu or Farastu. This is Kelubar, and then this is Shator. I try to stick to these as best I can, and I'm definitely better in like the second half of this video, but just so you know, those are the correct pronunciations. If you hear me say something different, it's technically wrong, but as I said earlier, they're all made up silly stupid words anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. So, what exactly are Demodands? They are the fiends native to Carceri, and they are the only creatures native to Carceri as far as I can tell. They will sometimes be found on the adjacent planes of Hades and the Abyss, but rarely anywhere else. There is something innate to the Demodands that will always drag them back to Carceri, tugged by some planar tether. Demodands are also called gehreleths. The same way demons are called Tanari, devils Batazu, and daemons gehreleths, the formal name of Demodand is gehreleth. I will be using the two words interchangeably throughout the video, so I wanted to get that out of the way to avoid further confusion. The name Demodand comes from the word Deodand, which is a creature in Jack Vance's Dying Earth series. In case you didn't know, Dungeons & Dragons was heavily influenced by Dying Earth. The magic system was taken straight from the series, and the name Vecna is an anagram of Vance. Deodand is also an English word used to refer to something that has been forfeited by the state and given to God because it killed someone, which sort of fits their theme of being imprisoned to an outer plane as punishment. Now, as far as I can tell, the word gehreleth has no origin and is just a made-up word. Gehreleths are chaotic evil in 1st and 2nd edition, and neutral evil in later editions. I couldn't find any lore explanation as to why they changed them to neutral evil. The only thing I can think of is that they don't take part in the Blood War, not caring whether law or chaos comes to dominate the lower planes, which is definitely a neutral thing to do. However, their desire to destroy and be agents of annihilation without any higher purpose definitely fits a chaotic alignment a lot more. I'll talk about their origin and society later in the video, but they don't really make any sense unless they are of chaotic alignment. There are exactly 9,999 gehreleths at any given time. 10,000 if you count Apalms, their deity and father. When the Blood War swells in activity, the gehreleths double their number to 19,998. Presumably, they do this for protection against the additional demons and devils fighting each other on their plane. No one is sure how they double their population so quickly. Some say the extra gehreleths are always around, just in hiding, and come out when needed. Others believe Apams deletes nearly all of its personal energies to create the additional fiends, reabsorbing their life force when he decides to drop their numbers. Either way, once the activity dies down, their number almost instantly halves again. Origin. According to 2nd edition, the Demodands have many origin stories. According to a Ch'Tor gehreleth, the gehreleths ruled the entire lower planes until they were reduced in number and imprisoned on Carceri by a cabal of evil deities who feared their power. According to a chant broker who acquired a tome bound in Kellubar skin from the upper planes, they were once the handsomest nobles of Elysium, but were disfigured and cast out by jealous archons and asuras. An Arcadian zoologist captured and observed a soul larva. Without the influence of fiends and night hags, it evolved into a Farastu. So she concluded that, quote, gehreleths must be the natural races of the lower planes, the intended kings of those blighted lands, end quote. All of those stories are told in Sigil and around the Great Wheel, but only one story takes into account their obsession with their obsidian triangles, their reverence for their god Apams, and their intense hatred of gehreleths. This story begins with Apams, one of the gehreleths. I talked about the origin of gehreleths in my gehreleth video, but essentially a long time ago when the multiverse was young, primal forces of evil and good fought each other. The forces of evil created the gehreleths, physical manifestations of pure evil. While the rest of the gehreleths argued what forms the children they were going to create should take, Apams took initiative, creating his own race without their approval. Molded from the clay of the lower planes, he created the gehreleths. He presented them to the gehreleth council, but they despised him and his creations. See, the gehreleths prized pure evil, but the gehreleths were tainted with chaos. Apams, ashamed and angry, fled the council and vowed vengeance on those who had humiliated him. After a long, maddening journey, he settled on Carceri, for the air was bitter and promised anger. Only a few gehreleths survived the trek, so he fashioned new ones with corpses, siphoned his own life force into them, and bestowed upon them obsidian triangles from which they derived their history and inner strength. He vowed to gain revenge against the gehreleths and their creations, the gehreleths. An alternate version of the story exists, stating the gehreleths were made first and the gehreleths were a poor attempt at mimicry. Either way, the story is convenient as it explains so much about the gehreleths that most scholars consider it valid. In 3rd edition, the Fiend Folio says that they were exiled from some other plane long ago and imprisoned in Carceri, and that the Ch'Tor and Kellubar blamed the Farastu for this exile. 5th edition also says they were cast into Carceri for their transgressions long ago, but neither 3rd or 5th edition go into any further detail that I could find. Hierarchy. The Demodands form a feudal society of barons and commoners. There are 3 subraces, the Farastu, the Kellubar, and the Ch'Tor, gaining strength and intellect as they go up the ranks. As a random side note, in 1st and 2nd edition, the words for each subrace, Farastu, Kellubar, and Ch'Tor, do not differentiate between plural and singular. It's always the same word, similar to the word moose. However, in 3rd and 5th edition, they do put S's at the end of the subrace names to denote plurality. For the purposes of this video, I am going to be taking the approach of 1st and 2nd edition and ignoring the S because I think it sounds cooler, and I tend to lean towards 2nd edition Planescape lore, but ultimately both are correct and it really doesn't matter. Anyways, as I said earlier, there are exactly 9,999 gehreleths. Each subrace makes up exactly 3,333. When a gehreleth dies, a new one immediately replaces it. If a Ch'Tor dies, then a Kellubar is promoted to replace it, a Farastu is promoted to replace the Kellubar, and then a new Farastu is created from the corpses of those who died on Carceri. Promotion in their society has nothing to do with proven merit or lessons learned. It is merely a matter of chance. So let's go through each of these subraces. First up, we have the Farastu, also called Tari Demodands, and they are the weakest of the race. They are the commoners of gehreleth society and are created from the rotting corpses of those who died on Carceri. They say the spirit goes to the plane of their god or alignment, but the body is used by Apams to refresh the ranks of the gehreleths. No one knows where he gets the spirits to fill these corpses. Frostu are humanoid in shape with long arms. They are 7 feet tall and weigh around 420 pounds in 1st and 2nd edition, but they weigh 220 pounds in 3rd edition. Being the commoners of their race, they are constantly subjected to a life of servility. So whenever they get the chance, they try to bully and push around weaker creatures, but they are well behaved when around Kelubars and Shators. When summoned to other planes, they like to set themselves up as kings of the stupid and easily bullied, and Apoms promotes this behavior as it gives him knowledge of the going-ons of other planes. The Frostu are known for turning on their summoners as they despise being taken from Carceri and obeying the commands of others. They will plot revenge and kill them at the first chance they get. Frostu are stronger than ogres and as smart as the average human, yet are still considered the weakest of the race, which they make up for with their fierceness in battle, attacking any non-gehreleths they see, for they have no fear of their own death. They are called tarry Demodands because their skin excretes a black tar that sticks to anything that touches it. I won't get into the nitty-gritty of the rules, but essentially anytime you attacked or it attacked you, there was a 5% chance you got stuck to their skin, giving the Frostu various bonuses to attack you. 5th edition removed this and replaced it with an auto grapple on their attack. By the way, when I say 5th edition, I mean the official stat block in the 5e Planescape box set. There are Demodands stat blocks in Minsc and Boo's Journal of Villainy, which is technically a Wizards of the Coast book. However, it was made by a different team and is only available to purchase on DM's Guild, so its official status is in a bit of a limbo. In that stat block, it does keep the sticky tar, but they have to use a reaction to use it. 3rd edition specifies that flammable oil will dissolve the adhesive slime, requiring 10 minutes for it to renew its coating. The slime will also break down and no longer be adhesive 1 minute after the creature dies. Frostu can attempt to summon other Frostu once per day, just like all Fiends can, and they have an array of spell-like abilities they can cast. I'm not going to list every spell they can cast in every edition, because it would just be several minutes of me listing spells, but I put all my sources in the description so you can check out the stat blocks yourselves if you're really interested. Although they have these magical capabilities, they prefer to fight with their long, sharp nails and huge jaws. In 2nd and 3rd edition, Frostu could enter a barbarian-like rage, giving them various stat increases. The Kelubar, also known as the Slime Demodands, are the middle class of gehreleth society. They act as bureaucrats, intermediaries between the Shator and Frostu, and superiors of Frostu squads. When summoned to the Prime, Kelubar will try to obtain as many magical items before being banished, taking them to Carceri to give themselves an edge in the power struggles of their society. They have little interest in ravaging or conquering the Prime Material Plane, preferring to tear apart the waste of their home plane. Kelubar are shorter and thicker than Frostu, being thickest in their lower torso and hands, and possessing large hands and oval-shaped heads. They are ebon-skinned and covered in pale green slime. They are 8 feet tall and weigh 490 pounds in 1st and 2nd edition, and they weigh 500 pounds with an 18-foot wingspan in 3rd edition. They are also covered in an acidic, nauseating slime. In 1st, 2nd, and 3rd edition, this causes them to deal additional acid damage on each melee attack, while in 5th edition, this causes people making melee attacks against them to take acid damage as the slime splashes off of them. In 2nd and 3rd edition, the slime exudes a horrible odor that requires a saving throw each round, or else one would be overcome with nausea and unable to do anything for several minutes. In 2nd edition, this slime protects them from fire and cold, giving them immunity to those damage types. They have many spell-like abilities at their disposal, but also attack with their sharp nails and teeth. Once per day, they can attempt to summon either Frostu or Kelubar to come to their aid. Shator, also known as Shaggy Demodands, are the most powerful and highest in the hierarchy of Demodands, acting as the ruling nobility and prison wardens of Carceri. It is said that the only fiends stronger than them are the Yagnoloth and Ultraloth. Their favorite hobby is writing, namely texts on how to summon fiends other than gehreleths, and philosophical texts that, quote, promote ideas of futility and cosmic angst, end quote. What they do is allow themselves to be summoned, then use their innate ability to beguile other creatures to remove all thoughts of banishment from their summoner, setting themselves up behind a mortal philosopher or artist. They induce visions of beautiful despair and grant a strange sense of poetry to their victim. Then, when they are done or bored, they ensure the human meets a terrible end. Their favorite pets are chimeras, oddly showing concern for these beings, the way a human would care for a kitten. Shator are 6 feet tall, squat, and broad with shaggy skin that drapes over their bodies, hence the nickname Shaggy Demodand. Their huge heads consist mostly of their mouth and jaws, like that of a bulldog. In 1st edition, they stand 6 feet tall and weigh 560 pounds. In 3rd edition, they stand 10 feet tall and weigh 700 pounds. Shator can fight with their nails and jaws, but they possess the dexterity to wield large weapons. However, they will always use the most intelligent plan of attack, which is usually to cast their spell-like abilities instead of engaging in melee. They possess extraordinarily sharp auditory and olfactory senses, giving them +2 to surprise rolls in 2nd edition, and making them only have a 10% chance of being surprised in 1st edition. 5th edition doesn't specifically state that they have keen senses, but it does give them expertise in perception. In 1st and 2nd edition, their shaggy, overlapping skin provides a -1 penalty to hit and damage from edged weapons, except short swords are excluded in 1st edition for some odd reason. In 3rd and 5th edition, Shator are covered in slime just like Kelubar, but this slime is a nerve toxin, paralyzing those hit by its claw or bite attack, or numbing those who attack them. They can also spit globules of this slime as a ranged attack, inflicting the same effect. In addition to their plethora of spell-like abilities, in 3rd edition, Shator can cast Plane Shift, using this to send other Demodands out to other planes to capture escaped prisoners and bring them back to Carceri. In 5th edition, they can still Plane Shift, but only to Carceri, not from it. Also in 5th edition, they can cast the Imprisonment spell, however it only does the chaining effect, and Scrying, which other editions did not have. In 1st, 2nd, and 3rd edition, Shator are immune to all mind-affecting spells. Just like all fiends, they are capable of summoning other gehreleths, getting to choose whether they summon Farastu, Kelubar, or Shator, but the more powerful subrace they choose either summons less or has a lower chance of success. Abilities. Let's discuss the abilities that all gehreleths possess. So, gehreleths are pound for pound stronger than almost all other fiends. A Shator could most likely defeat a Pit Fiend, Balor, or Ultraloth in straight-up battle, and even the Farastu could give high-ranking devils, demons, and daemons a run for their money. This is partly because of their natural abilities they are imbued with. Quote, "Though some leths have further abilities, these are the powers common to all members of the race. Sense the presence of good-aligned beings, sense the presence of creatures that try to hide invisibly, cause themselves to be so hidden, determine whether a place or object radiates magical power, do away with the effects of spells and other magic, read the minds of others, communicate verbally with foreign creatures, cause foes to flee in abject terror, summon other gehreleths to their aid, create banks of obscuring fog, and sap the strength of their enemies. The gehreleths can call upon some of these powers at will, and some only a certain number of times per day." End quote. This is just a fancy in-universe way of explaining what spells they can cast. Since the presence of creatures that try to hide invisibly is obviously see invisibility, and cause themselves to be so hidden is just invisibility, and so on. The exact spells they get vary from each edition, and that list I just gave was from 2nd edition. However, it's most notable with 5th edition, where they only get a handful of spells, and the Farastu actually don't get any spells in 5th edition. In 1st edition, all Demodands are immune to fear and illusions from spells. In 2nd edition, the Shator and Farastu keep this ability, but the Kelubar does not. In 3rd edition, the Shator is immune to mind-affecting effects, but the other two do not have anything like that at all. In 5th edition, the Shator have True Sight, which effectively makes them immune to illusions, and they all have immunity to the Frightened condition. In all editions, gehreleths are immune to acid and poison, and resistant to fire and cold. They also take less damage, or no damage depending on the edition, from non-magical weapons. This gets more extreme in 1st and 2nd, where you need a +2 or greater to hurt Kelubar, and a +3 or greater to hurt Shator. 1st edition says that all Demodands are winged, so that they can fly between the orbs of Carceri. Now, every edition keeps this with the Kelubar and Shator, however, the Farastu do not have wings in any edition except for 1st. The Farastu and Kelubar can turn themselves into the same secretion that their skin exudes, which is a lengthy and painful process taking several minutes to liquefy and twice as long to reform. These pools of slime can be bottled and stored for centuries as a kind of instant army. It is common for Shaitors to store these for personal security use. In 5th edition, this ritual must be done by a Shaitor. The Kellubar and Farastu cannot do it themselves. Also in 5th edition, all of the Demodands have an ability called Boundless Movement, granting them immunity to difficult terrain and magic that reduces their speed, and allows them to spend 5 feet of their movement to end the grappled condition. Obsidian Triangles. Every gehreleth carries an obsidian triangle that was given to them by Apoms upon their creation. It allows them to draw upon the memory of the entire race, letting them know who has summoned their kind and who to take revenge on. It also acts as a connection to Apoms. Some say that Apoms can see and hear through all of these, watching his race and their actions. Sages wish to study these, to see what magical secrets they can learn from them. Stealing one will bring the entire wrath of the race upon you, so the safest way to obtain one is to kill its owner. However, many believe they lose much of their potency when their owner is killed, so there is a thriving black market for the triangles stolen from still living gehreleths. In terms of what you gain from obtaining one, it is unclear, as no one has fully unlocked all their secrets. Destruction. No matter what plane a gehreleth is killed on, it is truly dead. Unlike all the other fiends, they don't reform if killed outside their home plane. They always die no matter where they are. However, a new one is immediately created from a Carcerian corpse to take its place. If a higher ranking one is killed, then the most convenient of lower rank is promoted to it, and then that one is replaced by a rank below it, and then the Farastu are created from a corpse. Technically, this is a new gehreleth, but since each newly created fiend is given an obsidian triangle that houses the memories of the whole race, it's really not that much different from them reforming like all other fiends do, as they'll still remember who wronged them. 5th edition changes this, stating that a Demodand killed outside Carceri will reform just like all other fiends, but it explicitly states that they will painfully reform in 2d20 days. Physiology. Since gehreleths are created from the rotting corpses of Carceri, they all maintain some of these dead qualities. They have loose skin, as if it were decaying on their bodies, and they all stink of uncured skins hanging in the breeze. They are also extremely ugly, even to other fiends. Reproduction. Gehreleths have no concept of gender, and are completely incapable of having sex, either for reproduction or pleasure. They simply can't do it at all. They exist only to destroy and cannot create new life. There are some accounts of gehreleths identifying as male or female, although it's very possible they were only doing so to trick a mortal. Physically, all gehreleths are neuter. Sleep. Demodands are imbued with the restless power of Apoms, seemingly never sleeping, always roaming to cause destruction and havoc. When the Farastu and Kellubar liquefy themselves into bottles, they might be achieving some form of rest, but no one really knows. Shaitor are always awake and aware, but they maintain a largely sedentary existence, occasionally resting to gather their thoughts. Nourishment. Gehreleths are fiends, and presumably immortal, so it's unlikely one could actually starve to death. However, they appear to be carnivores with voracious appetites. They eat all the time, most likely because there's just not much else to do. Society. Gehreleths are primal and instinctual, with little culture to speak of. They don't seem to have a purpose. They simply wander Carceri, committing random acts of mayhem and destruction, building up and tearing down the evil they cause, and no one is sure why they do it. Gehreleth society is a simple one based on raw power. Shaitor are the strongest, thus they are at the top of their hierarchy and command the rest. However, the Shaitor are creatures of whim, and hardly organize troops unless pressed to do so. Kellubar are the middle class, and their main goal is to destroy any fiendish armies, particularly Yugoloth ones they come across, but will gladly practice on mortals. Farastu are the commoners, subjected to a life of servility, and so they take out their frustrations on anyone they come across. When a Shaitor needs an army, or a Kellubar needs a job done, they call upon the Farastu. Apoms watches over all his creations, and occasionally when one is in dire need, they can call upon the power of their obsidian triangle to gain audience with Apoms. Gehreleths never fight among each other. Apoms forbids the infighting that is so common among the other fiendish races. Some say this is because they are all so closely linked. A blow against any gehreleth is felt by apoms, and those struck by another gehreleth are felt the most. Because of this, they lash out only against other creatures, and they lash out hard. Language. They have their own guttural language, but use their tongue's ability to speak to others. Even when speaking other languages, they sound, quote, guttural and raucous, full of malevolence that only the urge for true destruction can bring, end quote. In 5th edition, they can't cast tongues, but they have telepathy instead. Summoning. Like gehreleths, gehreleths are the summoning stock of the lower planes. Spells that summon a random lower planar creature, as opposed to a specific one, summons gehreleths 60% of the time, and then summons gehreleths the other 40% of the time. However, according to Carlvian Everhate, a drow wizard and scholar of the gehreleth race, this isn't true. Since gehreleths make up a small minority of total fiends, they are actually caught by summonings far less often. If a summoner knows the true name of a specific gehreleth, they can summon them using the spells Ensnarement or Gate. The spell Lesser Calling, or another means to summon a fiend randomly, will only bring a Farastu. Gehreleths always remember their servitude, passing these memories on to the rest of the race through their Obisidan Triangles, and they will take vengeance on their slavers. They don't grant powers or favors to their summoners, and while they can be bound to service through magic, it makes them seethe all the more. Never summon a gehreleth. Just let them be. Quote, gehreleths don't deal with mortals unless the fiends feel like toying with them. They don't press mortals into service, pummel them to get information, trick them into carrying out dark schemes, or anything of the sort. They simply commit violence upon their victims in such a manner as to amuse themselves greatly. They are openly contemptuous of all other creatures and won't show deference to any being, even if they are about to be destroyed. Their knowledge of their race's immortality keeps them from fear or respect of any sort. Generally, gehreleths talk to mortals only to taunt or anger them, or instill in them the dread of impending doom. End quote. And that is all the information I could find on the Demodands or gehreleths. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and remember to subscribe for more D&D related content.